Shop Plato's Closet tax-free August 2nd through 4th for back-to-school styles. We sell the trendy, gently used styles you need to make a difference in the world and in your wallet for back-to-school shopping. Save up to 70% off regular retail prices by choosing recycled styles. Save even more when you shop tax-free this weekend. Make a change that others can respect and repeat. Shop Plato's Closet in North Charleston and West Ashley this year for your back-to-school looks. Plato's Closet, located in West Ashley on Sam Rittenberg Boulevard and North Charleston on Rivers Avenue.
Welcome to Die Hard on a Blank, the podcast where we explore the influence of Die Hard on action cinema, one action movie at a time. I'm Liam Billingham, but you can call me Yogurt.
And I'm Philip Gawthorne.
Please, Yogurt. That's
That
what
was
I
amazing.
referred to.
That was amazing.
Oh my goodness. I don't know where to go from here.
And we'll see you next week.
Thank you so much.
Please like and subscribe.
This has been Yogurt Cast. The reason I made that joke is because today's film features a character named Yogurt. Phil, what film? What film are we talking about?
All right, let's sort it out. Today's film is Toy Soldiers, a.k.a.
It's Die Hard in a Prep School.
a.k.a. It's Die Hard meets Dead Poet Society.
Oh, Captain, my Captain. Our fearful terrorists are dead.
All right.
Oh, my goodness. Do you have much experience with prep school, Phil?
No, this was something I wanted, was on my list of notes here, was prep school. What's that all about?
Well, I didn't go to prep school. I was raised by pretty staunchly public school folks, and I am not the child of, like, you know, the scion of the Republican Party or anything like that. So I avoided it. And I didn't really grow up in that kind of milieu. But I would say that prep school it's a very uniquely American thing where rich people seem to send their underperforming children to live in a place and go to school and live amongst each other. It's like practice for college.
Is it exclusively for like underperforming kids as like that's what they are in this movie?
Yeah, that's what they are in this movie. But you know, there is a moment in this film where someone goes like, "Hey, my kid." It's actually a moment I like in the film. My kid is not a rich kid. Like I had some
like the only female character in this total sausage fest. By the way,
that's a very good point. I went to college with a guy whose mother worked at the school, and so as a result, he got to go for free. So like, you know, it's a mix, right? Like there is everywhere. But I think that this film really leans into the idea of like these are the shitty children of rich people, essentially, and underperformers.
But yet, we're supposed to be on their side.
Right. And you are on their side.
You root for them because of the likability of the actors, but on paper, it's like this is the son of the co-chairman of the Republican Party.
Yeah.
This is the son of an oil magnate.
Yeah.
This is the son of the head of a bank in New York. You
right.
know, and basically...
So it's a weird scene, but it's a smart device that the movie uses.
But what I think is cool about it as well is that, you know, without wanting to jump ahead, a key character, who I want to rhapsodize about later, says it's not these kids' fault who their fathers are. You know?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Very quickly, just give me a one sentencer on what this movie is about. One sentence.
Okay. Terrorists take over an exclusive prep school, and a group of rebellious students fight back.
And it takes place probably in the Northeast in some leafy academic setting.
I think it's maybe New York State or
it could
New
be.
England. Or,
it's where I grew up,
right.
essentially.
This is your world.
This is my world. But I will say that I do have a bit of a relationship with this movie. I have a very strong memory of watching this movie on VHS with my family in like August of 1992 after it came out on VHS on a family vacation in Cape Cod. Like I have a very clear
specific.
memory of seeing it. I probably because it was like teenage kids and that kind of thing. And like I remember it kind of being like a thing when it came out. And I don't think I would have remembered that it was Will Wheaton. You know what? My family was a Star Trek The Next Generation family, and my sisters loved Will Wheaton. And that's probably why we watched it. What's your, are you a big fan?
So my relationship with this movie is very unusual for this podcast because it's one of the few films that I had never seen.
What?
And I think the reason for that was my sense of it. I knew it was around and I had friends who were like, oh, Toy Soldiers is great. And it wasn't that I consciously avoided it, but it seemed to me a sort of kiddie Die Hard, or like, and I was already into Die Hard, so it was like, well, why would I want a diluted version? And I was probably, I don't know, maybe I was trying to work it out, probably 11, 12 by the time I'd seen Die Hard. And I think this is a movie that if you saw it at like 8 or 9, before your
I was 10 when I saw
critical
it.
faculties have started to emerge, it's like awesome.
Yeah.
And I like this. I like this movie. We're gonna discuss it. I'm not here to. I'm not bashing it. As I watched it recently as a semi-adult, my suspicions about it was sort of validated because
Interesting.
it was kind of like a little cartoonish.
Well, yeah, there's a lot to break down there in terms of some of the production choices, I would say, in the movie. But first,
Yes.
would you give me some fast facts, some top-line facts about Toy Soldiers?
I would love to.
Thank you, Phil.
All right. So, Toy Soldiers was released by TriStar in the US on April 26, 1991. Again, that was the same studio as Narrow Margin. So it was, which was our last movie. So it was sort of,
Seven,
8 months or so after that movie. And just coming up on 3 years after the original Die Hard, which this is clearly emulating, to be kind.
This might be the closest homage that we've talked about.
For sure.
For
Yeah,
sure.
for sure. It was directed by Daniel Petrie Jr. and produced by Mario Kassar, Mark Berg, and Chris Zarpus. It stars Sean Astin, Will Wheaton, Andrew Divoff, and the incredible Louis Gossett Jr.
Iron Eagle.
Oh,
Iron Eagle. He had a bit of a run working with troubled boys in the.
I can't speak to Iron Eagle, but I can speak to some of his other.
You've never seen Iron Eagle?
Well, I had the same issue with it. It's like, so this is Kiddie Top Gun. Like, I want,
But
give
I
me the
think
real
kiddie
shit.
action movie is an interesting genre to talk about around this time.
I don't
because
like
there's
it.
I
don't like
can
it.
tell. Wow, Phil has a look in his eyes. Weird.
I was
Phil's
a
wearing
weird kid.
Yeah.
Like I didn't like if the kids
This doesn't go hard
the
enough
kids
for
are,
me.
Yeah, exactly. The kids are watching like Lion King, and I'm like Terminator. I didn't like kiddie content.
Yeah.
You know,
Sure.
I don't know.
Lion King rocks. It's based on Hamlet, though.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I guess so. Yeah.
Oh my
yeah, it is. Yeah,
God.
you're right.
The screenplay was written by.
Doesn't have any helicopters in it though, so why would
Actually,
I
if you
give a
watch
fuck?
closely when he's holding Simba up, there's a guy firing a machine gun. In the background.
No helicopters, no Philly.
I'm going to remake movies for you with just helicopter shootouts in them. The screenplay was written by the director, Daniel Petrie Jr., and David Koepp.
Yeah,
One of
interesting
the
to see
great
his
Hollywood
name.
screenwriters.
Yeah, one of his earlier
A million
credits.
movies, right? He wrote a million
Jurassic
good movies.
Park.
Jurassic Park.
I think he wrote Carlito's Way in the same.
He did, right?
year.
Carlito's-
Imagine that. Like,
Mission Impossible?
yep,
yeah.
many classics.
Absolutely.
And it's based on a novel, interestingly.
Go ahead.
Yeah, based on thanks. Based on the novel of the same name by William P. Kennedy, which was released in 1988, the same year that Die Hard came out.
And it was made on an estimated budget of $10 million, and it grossed $15 million. So
But it did okay, but was considerably more successful in the home video market,
right, which is where I saw it when I rented it.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about a couple things here. What do we know about Daniel Petrie Jr.?
So one of his early and most interesting credits was he was the writer of Beverly Hills Cop.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. That's a good movie.
And speaking of some Die Hard DNA, he was also the writer of Turner and Hooch, starring Die Hard alumni Reginald Vell Johnson.
Oh, that's right. Wow. So this is his directing debut?
I think it was his debut. So he'd had a pretty successful screenwriting career. His father, Daniel Petrie Sr., was also a director of some note. Directed Fort Apache, The Bronx, the Paul Newman.
Yeah.
The Paul Newman.
It's a little bit of
urban
Hollywood royalty going on here.
So, it, in a weird way that sort of is echoed in the movie with, the sort of, the idea of lineage and important fathers. And maybe that was something that resonated with him. So
speaking of lineage, Sean Astin's performance in this movie. Sean Astin obviously goes on to be like a pretty big movie star, but I think his later work is eclipsed by playing Samwise Gamgee in The Lord of the Rings. But there was it's just so funny to think of him as like the sort of anti-authoritarian tough guy he is in this movie. And also Will Wheaton, big child star. So it's interesting sort of, Kitty Die Hard and like the casting in this movie and actors that went on to have some pretty cool careers. Like they're both still around.
Yeah. I think they're really good. I think
Mm-hmm.
both of them are really good, and actually, sort of their charm and compensates for some of the unlikability of the characters, frankly.
Yeah.
So really, just laying the table of something that is really important about this is that this is, as we touched on, but this is the first bad guys take over a blank movie, right? Other than the direct Die Hard sequels, this is the first Die Hard on a blank, like that is outside of the Die Hard canon. It is such a blatant copy
Right.
of the structure of specific moments. I mean, it's the amount of Die Hard parallels in this movie is crazy. Obviously, there's the immediately obvious thing: bad guys take over the school, and it's up to one man on the inside to.
So this
fight
might
back.
be the origin of the term "die hard on a
Yeah.
blank." That expression, which essentially means terrorists take over X, and it's up to one man or woman, or in this case, group of people, to defeat the terrorists. And so there's a lot of Die Hard DNA in this section of the movie. You want to tell us about what some of that is?
There certainly is. Toy Soldiers also features a trustworthy ally on the outside who helps the hero navigate this tactically complex situation and provides assistance and guidance and moral support throughout. It's much like the original movie. There's scenes where Sean Astin's character is crawling through like air ducts. There's a bit at
Tunnels.
There's a bit at the end where he's firing he's like holding up an MP5 machine gun and going like, get it out,
Yeah.
just like he's waving the hostages through. I mean,
That's a good one.
The
Yeah.
echoes are all over the place. There's also some interesting genealogical connections with some of the people involved. They're slightly circuitous. Mario Casar pops up again, who we
He
mentioned
produced
before.
Narrow Margin.
He was on that. Legendary action producer, produced First Blood, and the other Rambo films. Die Hard was, of course, heavily influenced by First Blood and was pitched as Rambo in a building. Casar also produced several other Die Hard on a blank style movies, Narrow Margin, which we've talked about, and Cliffhanger. But the main point of relevance here is the central concept, which is very clearly a Die Hard scenario.
Absolutely. It's got big Die Hard kind of vibes.
Big Die
in it.
Hard energy.
Yeah, and there's a lot. I mean, it's a really interesting movie. It comes on that era, as we pointed out, of like kiddie action hero rife. So, like, I think the best sort of version of that is, or the most talked about, is Red Dawn from 1984, where kids fight off a Russian invasion. And is it in
There's sort of
Washington?
wish fulfillment fantasies, but
Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned Red Dawn because there is a slight right wing. Red Dawn is it's John Milius, right?
Yeah.
It's a straight up right wing fantasy,
Right.
And I'm not a huge fan of Red Dawn, even though I love the people in it, and I think Milius is an incredible writer.
Yeah.
But the politics of it are kind of icky, right?
Yeah, for sure.
This film has, in a less egregious way, some of the same feelings that just left me feeling a little like, I don't know that I like the messaging and
Ooh, I'm curious to get into that.
Yeah.
Very quickly, I would like to call out my favorite of the kiddie action movies, which is If Looks Could Kill, the Richard Grieco film from 1989, where he's mistaken for a spy named Michael Corbin and ends up in castles in Russia fighting off Linda Hunt and a bunch of other sort of, it's like a great Bond spoof. And I mean, probably if I watched it now, I would have mixed feelings about it, but there was a moment where it was like, let's make action movies with kids, which is really
it's kind of
weird.
an interesting, now that you're mentioning it, there is a sort of a weird subgenre. That movie was called Teen Agent in the UK. It had
Right.
a completely different title,
Oh,
which I think is actually much better.
Oh, I
'Cause
love.
if,
You like Teen Agent more than If Looks Could
If
Kill?
Looks Could Kill ... Like, how are you even fitting that on the
Oh,
fucking poster?
but it's like a James Bond title. I love it. I think it's great. Yeah, I'll get out of here with
I'm
this.
not into
Teen
it. But there was
Agent.
another movie like that called it was the Anthony Edwards one from the mid '80s. That was Gotcha, right?
Gotcha, yeah.
Gotcha.
Maybe
and
it
a
was a
movie
different
before
film.
that called Tag the Assassination Game that were like these kiddie.
Wow,
action
I thought I was
movies
digging deep with If Looks Could Kill, and you just put me. Now I'm over here like, oh, cool. I love my If Looks Could Kill reference.
I had to go a little deeper.
Yeah, this is a strange movie. But an interesting movie, and a movie that at times really works for me, and at other times just doesn't land it for me. Should we look at it in terms of
let's
an
talk
action movie?
about-
Let's
yeah.
talk about our anatomy of an action movie. The anatomy of an action is sort of your design is a very smart way of breaking down action movies into 5 major categories. Die Hard being the model because it sort of has full marks, A+, 100%. It's the teacher's pet of action movies, according to the Master Phil. So what are the 5 characteristics that make up an action movie?
All right. So there's the premise slash the plot. In this case, it's Colombian terrorists taking over a prep school. In other cases, bomb on the bus, whatever it is. The premise is that a strong premise. Within that and within the premise and the plot is the ticking clock. Then we have the hero. We also have the villain. And we have the action itself, the set pieces, the stunts, the imagery, and finally the humor, which I think is also an important part of the action movie
Absolutely.
puzzle.
And occasionally I'm going to throw in the lady or the character, sort of like the character.
If you want to throw in a tenet, you feel free.
Oh, we live in a Twilight world. However, this movie has no ladies in it. This movie has no damsels or sort of
woman who goes, "We aren't rich, so we should."
It is, as you pointed out, it could be retitled Sausage Party.
It's just
the Seth Rogen. Yeah, there's no ladies. This is a boy movie.
One.
This is the definition of what someone might be like, oh, that's a boy movie, because this is literally a movie about essentially prepubescent boys who are also ripped.
Right,
John Austin
is
ripped in this movie. It's like the guy who's 18 years old,
but
is 12.
It's easy to
He's
like
the
when
Nelson
you're 15,
Muntz
you're not carrying the weight of 30 years of drinking beer.
Yeah, that's right. But they do drink. You have the 2 years of drinking vodka mouthwash.
Oh yeah.
So let's talk about the plot of this movie.
All right.
What is this movie about?
So, the Sean Austin and
Will Wheaton.
Will Wheaton and a bunch of lovable ruffians.
Keith Coogan,
or
George Perez, T.E. Russell, Sean Phelan as Yogurt. That's some of the boys in this movie.
Let that sink in.
Yes.
There is a character in this movie called Yogurt, or Yogurt, as we like to say in the UK. By the by, I did some research about that. And apparently that was like that was the actor's name because he spilled yogurt in the truck and the name stuck. It's like the worst. Like,
I love that his name's Yogurt though. It's great,
and it's never explained.
So they're hanging out at a prep school.
And
they have a friend whose dad is a judge.
Right.
And he gets pulled out of school because over in Colombia, or the 1990s version of Colombia, where terror reigns. Lawless
anarchist nightmare.
The United States have taken a Colombian drug lord, and his son has vowed revenge. He comes to the United States, takes over the prep school. Little does he know, though, that the administration and the law enforcement have taken the boy out of the school the day before. By the way, the administration of this film is Louis Gossett Jr. in the role of Edward Parker, the dean of the school, and my pal, Denholm Elliott.
Oh, gosh.
As headmaster Dr. Rupert Gold. Denholm Elliott plays Marcus in the Indiana Jones movies.
Yes, yep, well known for that.
So they take the boy out of school along with the law enforcement, and the very next day, the terrorist, Louis Cali, played by Andrew Divoff,
yep,
and his henchmen, most of whom are, quite frankly, unremarkable, show up and take over the school. And they realize that although they don't have the son of the judge who's going to put Cali's father in jail, that they have a bunch of rich kids who've all been sent to prep school, and they decide to hold them hostage until Cali's father is released from jail.
Yeah. So it's a moment of, the plan has failed, but it's sort of an opportunistic pivot, basically.
It's one of the smarter things the movie does, in my opinion.
I mean, at the beginning, this sets up, if we're talking about rating this is a good premise,
good
right?
Premise.
Okay, it's a straight up Die Hard ripoff, fine. Like, we've all done it, no problem.
We've all ripped off Die Hard. Who among us? Yeah, who among us?
We're not above it. Like, it's fine. Like, if you're going to steal from the best, right?
So these terrorists, they take over a podcast.
Okay.
Now, you mentioned that this film gives you little icky vibes. You want to tell me, is now a good time to talk about your icky vibes?
It's more towards the end.
Okay.
But yeah, no, you know what? Let's talk about it, because one of the things, the movie does something different from the novel. So I read in the novel, the prep school is in Rome. And
really?
they're American students. And the terrorists are Palestinians who have a specific political agenda, rather than in this instance they're not even really terrorists per se. They're an extension of a Colombian drug cartel. The point is, it's quite similar to the adaptation of Nothing Lasts Forever in that respect, in that the bad guys are depoliticized for the film. The book has a sort of morally gray worldview where, there's good and sort of good and bad on all sides, or just everyone's really kind of gray. No one's really like holier than thou. The film simplifies that. Probably quite wisely for a mainstream audience and the kind of
it's kind of a summer or like late spring movie.
It's good and evil. It's black and white. There's no nuance. That's fine. I don't there's no problems there. Some of the characters from the book are Billy Tepper, the Sean Astin character, and Joey Trotter, the Will Wheaton character, who is interesting because he's the son of a mafia boss. But in the book, the mafia boss is a CIA asset who feeds back information to the U.S. government about international drug deals.
Wow, that's so cool.
So that was quite an original aspect. So it's okay. So why do I feel this? There's a sort of slight ickiness to it. It's mainly because the finale of this film, which were the whole film is like a siege situation. The military are outside. Are they going to raid it? This was the scenario that
it's a bit of a ticking clock in the movie.
That's one of the book is the same, where it's like, are they going to raid it or are they not? Is it worth the risk?
Yeah.
The calculus of that, which was in all of these books, and Toy Soldiers, the book is it's like derived from Nothing Lasts Forever, more so than derived from Die Hard, because it came out just before Die Hard was released. But it's very much like Nothing Lasts Forever, and a lot like the book that Die Hard 2 was based on, 58 Minutes by Walter Wager. Tons of these sort of paperback airport novels were like these types of situations where terrorists take over a blank, and the calculus of, do we take out the hostages? And of course that had happened in real life, and it was obviously on the minds, speaking to the Iran hostage crisis and various other sort of scenarios that happened around that time. This is something that was clearly in the zeitgeist and in big part of the American psyche, right? What do we do in this situation? It's kind of a moral conundrum. There's hostages at risk. We don't negotiate with terrorists, and the stakes are raised in this one because they're kids. The thing that made me a little more uncomfortable with it is that the celebration of militarism and the sort of it's basically like Dwayne T. Robinson's wet dream is what happens at the end. In Die Hard,
they go in and it's
perfect, and they kill everybody.
And they're dressed
no
ridiculously with the black on their face, which, by the way, they would completely stand out in the courtyard. You're kind of like, why are they all dressed in black with black? Like, it doesn't make. Yeah, I hear you.
So it was sort of that aspect of it where it was like, the Die Hard. It celebrates everything that Die Hard critiqued. Die Hard, when they try basically the gung-ho, ass-kicking, let's go, kick ass. That kind of the thing, like Dwayne T. Robertson says.
And then he pricks his finger.
They emasculate that
all those
idea.
SWAT team
they
guys.
Emasculate the sort of unthinking American machismo-like attitude towards these kind of situations at the time, which are also further embodied by the FBI agents Johnson & Johnson and their completely amoral approach to well, if we take out, what do you figure of the breakage? Well, if we take out, all the terrorists and we lose 15-20% of the hostages, whatever they say, that is an acceptable ratio.
It's like Saigon, Slick?
But this was weirdly, as the more I go down this rabbit hole, this concept and this moral quandary of what do you do in these, if there is a terrorist scenario, was in all of these books and a bunch of these movies. But the sort of position that this film is just like, I don't really want to deal with the moral complexity of it. Good guys win, and we're all job done.
So I have an interesting thought in response to that, which is, what I thought about while watching this movie? Peter Pan.
Huh.
The reason that I thought about Peter Pan is that I think that there is something really interesting in this movie, and I wrote it down here, that this movie takes place in a world where the kids are right, the adults are always wrong, except for Louis Gossett Jr., and these parents have locked their kids away. So there's something anti-authoritarian in the approach. There's a middle section of this movie, which we can get into in the action section, where Sean Astin has snuck off the property to very wisely give as much information he's gathered, similar to McClane, check, he's gathered a bunch of information about these terrorists, and he goes off of the property to share it, and none of the commandos will allow him back into the school. And he's like, if I don't get back for head count, they're going to execute 5 of these kids. And it's this moment in the movie where I'm like, no one's listening to the kids, right? The only person that the kids that anyone takes seriously, Louis Gossett Jr. is the only person that takes any of these kids seriously. And that really resonated for me, especially like, look, I can't ascribe what the goals of the director are in the film, but the fact that there's this like family lineage in Hollywood with his background, but also the Will Wheaton rejecting his father, saving him. There's something to this movie that feels like pro-youth, pro-young people, pro the idea that like, hey, the kids are all right. And even at the end, the SWAT team barely takes out a single terrorist. The 3 guys in a callback, I think, to Die Hard, get blown up by the drop grenade that the terrorists on the roof get. So like, there's a certain amount of like similarity in that Sean Astin has a connection to Louis Gossett Jr. Louis Gossett Jr. is the only person that believes Sean Astin, and everyone else is a shitty functionary. So while I agree that at the end there might be a little bit of like rah-rah, commandos save it, the commandos don't actually do anything.
Which, by the way, I secretly love.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's entertaining, right? It's entertaining to watch.
It's really quite thrilling.
Like, they don't even take out... Do they take out Callie? Yeah, Callie is the only person...
That moment's very, 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 very interesting.
Right.
Which I want to,
But I think the movie has a little bit of like, adults are wrong and kids are right mentality to it. And it read as thematically more complex than I think the movie necessarily. I think that every director makes a movie with intent. I think for instance, our last film we talked about, there's a little bit of narrow margin that feels like it's about aging and being middle-aged to my mentality. And this film has a little bit of like, can we trust adults? They put us in these schools and they want nothing to do with us, but then they come running to save us. It's an interesting question.
What's interesting in the book, though, is that the Billy Tepper character has unflinching faith in that the military, and he calls them the Screaming Eagles, like the sort of Delta Force commandos that will come parachuting in. He has complete faith that they will come in and save the day. So there's no sense of the film doesn't really do that.
Sean
in quite
Astin's
the same
suspicious
way.
of all adults.
He's
very
suspicious of everyone. I want to just pick up on one of the points you raised there, which is the head count, which I think is a really clever ticking clock in the movie, because basically the film is weirdly relaxed for long periods, right?
The kids are weirdly relaxed. They're playing ball.
Exactly.
Like, why are you so chill out? I would be like literally me, and I'd be sobbing the entire time.
It's wild.
These kids, there's points when they're like, can't believe this place got taken over by terrorists.
And the terrorists are just walking around with like machine guns.
Like with Kalashnikovs, just like chilling.
The kids are throwing frisbees around in the
weird.
quad.
And Denholm Elliott's like, let me tell you about Roosevelt.
Yeah. It's sort of that part of it I found fascinating, but really kind of weird and unconvincing. But what they do that's quite clever is the terrorists say, like, there's an hourly head count. And I think there's 90 students,
92.
Right? Or something like that, right? 92. And if there's one missing, they will execute 5. So that's a great device for a dramatic standpoint. And that, as you're saying, like, there's a point when Sean Astin's character is almost going to miss that, and it's a very exciting, suspenseful sequence. So I think that ticking clock, there's sort of 2. There's that, and then there's the bigger question of, are the authorities going to raid it?
And to that
and what
point,
will the consequences be if they do?
Part of the problem is that if the authorities raided it, like, part of the problem with the authorities raiding it is that, like, they need all the information from the guys on the inside. Like, they're not actually capable of really being that helpful. They can't, I mean, and maybe that's part of what makes the movie work. They can't gather intelligence, they can't do all these things, but, like, you're actually waiting for them to come in because, from my point of view, you don't think it's going to go well. And, like, a larger point I'd like to raise is that I think that the movie has sort of an emotional relationship to kind of like kids and their parents and stuff like that. I'd be curious to see this movie in the hands of like a Paul Verhoeven in terms of like how he would handle the ending of the movie and the militarism.
I think it'd be very different.
Very different. And I it's just interesting to think about, like, if there might be some critique in this, but it's certainly not like of the militarism necessarily. It's more about like legacy and fathers and sons.
Yeah, sins of the father. And will these kids have to pay for the sins of their father, who are sort of touched on as kind of people that are like titans of industry or powerful politicians and assumed to be not the most morally upstanding people. The film doesn't really go into too much detail. The book does.
But there's another Sins of the Father thing to think about, which is the Cali, Enrique Cali, the father
Yeah.
of Louis Cali. Enrique Cali is the drug dealer that's been taken by the U.S. authorities, and his son has to act in violence to get him back, right?
Yeah.
So there's like, this is definitely a movie that's preoccupied by fathers and sons.
And the Will Wheaton, his father is a mafia
Joey
don.
Trotta, his father, played by Jerry Orbach in
Yeah,
an
he has an
uncredited role.
uncredited
He's
cameo.
he's in 2 scenes, right?
Yeah.
Albert Trotta, I guess the biggest mob boss in the United States or something like
Yeah,
that.
so
I
that's
feel like a scene is
interesting.
cut with Jerry Orbach. I feel like there's something missing that they removed from the movie because maybe it wasn't working or for time or there's a whole bunch of factors for that. Let's talk about the hero.
Yeah. So the hero here is Billy Tepper, played by Sean Astin. Rebellious, troublemaking student at Regis High School. He's squandering his potential. Again, he shares a number of McClane-like characteristics.
Resourceful.
Improvises.
He improvises. He conducts a kind of guerrilla warfare, or he sort of actually gathers a lot of information. There's a little bit of like not only a callback to Die Hard, but to me, I thought a little bit about The Great Escape, like watching them kind of like, Will Wheaton is a great drawer, so you occasionally see him drawing the terrorists, doing pictures. It's very smart, and it's all masterminded by Billy Tepper, Sean Astin, who's great in this movie.
He is great. And also, like McClane, he has, to your point, it's interesting. It's good that you're sort of challenging my sort of feelings around it. He does have a hatred of authority, but I think it's in a way that, as an adult, comes across as petulant and irritating. Whereas if you're 9 years old, or
I'm sure I thought he was so cool.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas now I watch it and I'm like, why are you spray painting rejects on the front of the there's a scene where it's called the Regis High School and he spray paints the Rejects High School. That's how we meet him.
Well, this
and I'm
is
like,
one of those weird
to
moments
what
in
end?
the movie.
What has that achieved?
The first 20 minutes of the movie feels like Porky's or something
I was
like
going to say that's Die Hard meets Porky's.
And then there's like machine gun fire rings out in the cafeteria and suddenly it becomes a different movie. The one thing that's smart, so the first 20 minutes of the movie, the boys sneak off to drink vodka mouthwash and call a phone sex operator
Super
in the
uncomfortable.
basement, like a sealed off basement from the rest of the school. What's smart about that is that it establishes that basement. So it's like, it's not completely
Yes.
unfunctional. There's
Yeah,
a
yeah.
lot, maybe too much setup. It also does the work, speaking of Billy Trotter, of setting up as him as like, in opposition to Louis Gossett Jr. as Dean Edward Parker. So like, we know that they have a tumultuous, difficult relationship.
So I think, yes, Sean Astin's charm
Yeah.
and light touch and just innate likability, for me, I think makes a character that, as an adult, I find quite irritating, likable.
Yeah. You know what's interesting about him? You never meet his parents. And I think that's really important
that's
to
something I was
understanding
going to say
his
as well. The
rebelliousness.
absence of, apart from the Jerry Orbach character, we never see these parents. So there's that feeling of they're absent and they're on their own and they're sort of
they lock their
untethered.
kids away, right? And they
know?
have no one telling them besides Louis Gossett Jr. Which is like one of the best parts of the movie is you believe Louis Gossett Jr. is like caring and loving these kids.
Yeah.
I think that's
And,
really important.
when this movie began, and this is a good sort of microcosm of the problem, the issue with the movie, right? It begins with this crazy sequence where it's in this lawless Colombia, and Louis Cali takes over a courtroom. I think it's the Palace of Justice.
Yeah.
Throws jurors out the window. It's total Scarface
It's
land.
bizarre,
He throws
yeah.
a judge out of a helicopter. Like, it's very, very wild and intense and kind of scary.
It's wildly photographed too. It's very intense.
Yeah, it's intense and it's cold open. You're just dropped in it. You're like, wow. Then it has this really awkward transition.
Yeah, I wrote down weird transition.
Right?
Like the guy's falling out of the plane, and then it's
now it's fun and hijinks.
The score in the film is bizarre too. It's sometimes patriotic, and other times like
I think it's really good at the ending and the finale, but this doesn't work.
It's strange.
It's such a weird disconnect between two completely different tones. And as I said, I'd never seen this movie, so I'm watching that and I'm like, uh-oh. And then Louis Gossett Jr. shows up, and I'm like,
heck yeah, baby.
it's gonna be okay. We're gonna be okay, because he centers this whole thing. He is amazing.
He's in some ways the hero of the movie. And at the end, he takes a bullet. As you said, you wanted to discuss the scene where at the very end of the film, Robert Cali has Sean Astin's Billy Tepper in like a stranglehold, has a knife to his throat or something. Or he has the detonators.
Yep.
And Louis Gossett Jr. dives through the window, takes a bullet before I think the SWAT
One of the
team
SWAT guys actually takes
out
Callie out. So it's actually that bit's a little bit like the book of the Nothing Lasts Forever, like in the sense it's slightly messy, although it's still it's bad guy gets killed.
Yeah.
Job done.
All the tension is resolved,
Yeah.
essentially.
Shop Plato's Closet tax-free August 2nd through 4th for back-to-school styles. We sell the trendy, gently used styles you need to make a difference in the world and in your wallet for back-to-school shopping. Save up to 70% off regular retail prices by choosing recycled styles. Save even more when you shop tax-free this weekend. Make a change that others can respect and repeat. Shop Plato's Closet in North Charleston and West Ashley this year for your back-to-school looks. Plato's Closet, located in West Ashley on Sam Rittenberg Boulevard and North Charleston on Rivers Avenue.
Should we talk about the villain while we're
This
on?
feels like a great
while
transition
we're on,
right into the
Lewis
villain.
Callie.
Not that memorable.
I like him in this movie.
Good act.
Yeah, I think he's an interesting guy. He's a Venezuelan of Russian descent. He speaks 9 languages. This is the actor I'm talking about, Andrew Divoff. You might have recognized him from. He had a small part in another movie we've done, Hunt for Red October. A bigger part in Another 48 Hours.
Who is he in The Hunt for Red October?
His character is called Andre Almaric. So I assume he's one of the sub.
He's
Russian,
probably on the
sailors.
Huh.
He had a bigger part in Another 48 Hours, which is quite memorable as the villainous biker Cherry Gantz, who was the brother of
Cherry Gantz is a good name.
The character, the James Remar character from the first movie. He'd go on to appear in Air Force One, another Die Hard on a Blank movie.
Is he just one of the? Is he just
Boris
one?
Basilev?
Oh, that was my birth name. That was actually that's my name.
Perhaps best known for his role in the Wishmaster horror films.
Ah, okay.
And yeah, as you say, I think he's good. He doesn't have a ton of dimension. There's a couple of nuanced moments that I really liked.
He's sadistic. He beats when he gives the quote unquote
what
rod
he says
to Billy
to
Tepper.
your point is in that scene when he beats Tepper when he beats Billy as a sort of punishment for him missing the head count. He says, "This is how my father taught me discipline." So it is echoing the theme that it's actually you're kind of convincing me that there is quite a strong thematic unity that I wasn't necessarily attuned to. The one thing that is a shame about this, so I think he's good, but we can't play Who's Your Favorite Terrorist because the other terrorists have no personality whatsoever, with one notable exception.
Video game guards.
Yeah.
They're guys that don't seem to sleep or eat. Well, they eat, but
non-playable characters.
Yeah, there's a guy who's on the roof who 48 hours, 3 days, who knows how long it's been. He's still up there. He's like, hey, what's up? And it's like, how bad do you smell? You've been up here for 5 days. Have you eaten anything besides spit sandwiches?
Yeah.
Like, what's going on there?
Yeah, it's true. Because it's really hard to discern how long has this siege gone on for, because it feels like it's 6 months.
Yeah.
And
when I was a kid, it felt like a long time. Now I think it's like 6 days.
or weeks.
6 days.
It's sort of hard to tell because they all seem to have just relaxed into this new reality. There is one exception to the colorless villains, which is the character of Jack Thorpe, Lewis Callie's American henchman, who's presumably a hired mercenary, played by an actor called Michael Champion. Now, I don't know if
Carl of this movie.
Yeah, 100%. Now, I don't know if you recognize this gentleman, but he is a graduate from henchman school because he was a henchman in Beverly Hills Cop. A small part as the guy, when James Russo's character gets twatted on the head and then killed at the beginning.
Yes, it's been a long time since I've rewatched Beverly Hills
by Jonathan
Cop.
Banks, later of super fame from
right. Wow.
Breaking Bad. He's the other goon in that scene. Then he has a slightly bigger henchman role in Total Recall as one of Michael Ironside's goons.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
What are you trying to do? Kill us?
Right.
The dome will crack.
Right. Wow.
Guy. Now I noticed in that his actor's secret is that he wears weird glasses. That's his.
And he has the white hair. Is the white hair consistent across the other films?
Michael Champion's entire approach to characterization is this character wears weird spectacles.
But I wrote down something about his vest. I really liked his vest.
I'm into it.
Oh yeah, the tackle vest with the second in command. Felt like
into it.
They were doing the costumes and they're like, I don't know, get the LL Bean catalog out. Let's see what this guy's vest looks like. LL Bean, I don't know if you know, is like a.
One went over my head. I'm afraid it sailed right past me.
It's like a fishing clothing store. The main branch is in Maine, but the vest and the flannel shirt feels like straight out of 1990s style. It's unbelievable. Very specific.
You know what? Speaking of that, something that I did pick up on that I was really jealous of was a bunch of the characters in this movie are rocking Reebok pumps.
Oh,
and I've been
those shoes
trying to
kick
get a
ass.
pair
You
of
look
them.
good. You can pull that off. I can't pull that. I can't wear high tops. That's not a good look for me.
I've been trying to get a pair of Reebok pumps.
Are we
forever.
running through the trees and through the swamps and Reebok pumps? It seems like it'd be kind of uncomfortable.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
They're a little too tall.
It's
You're-
sort of like walking on the moon. I
Yeah,
think,
for sure. We're moonwalking. If you think about the 90s. He doesn't do that much for me. He's not a Carl, right?
No.
And there's a little bit of like, he actually feels a little more like a Hans in that he's not as physical except at the end of the movie. Can I offer just a little bit of a pet peeve of action movies that drives
Please.
me a little nuts? Because I don't think it's actually realistic. There's a scene at the end of the first day of the siege when they're ushering all the kids into rooms and the henchmen are just pushing the kids and like on the move. It's like, how much faster do you want these kids to move? And I feel like it's just a little bit like, how do we make this scene more interesting? When it's like, all it is irritating. And like, I just don't think
Right.
that that's actually necessarily what's
It's
going
just like
to happen.
you thought you hated these terrorists. Why don't you hate them a little bit
it
more?
feels like an action movie thing as opposed to like organic
Right.
to what's happening in the movie, where they would probably just be going like, move it.
Yeah,
Move.
He's got
go
a gun.
faster.
I mean, you don't need to like
Yeah.
hassle me.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, yeah, this guy is Andrew Divoff as Louis Cali. He's a good actor, and I think his best moments are when he seems openly resentful of his father. I wish the movie had explored that a little bit more.
The one thing I was going to say that I really like about his performance is the stuff at the end when he realizes the net is closing in and they are siege. You know this,
And he gets desperate.
He gets desperate, and
Yeah.
you feel it. And that's I don't recall seeing that too much in action movie villains. They tend to be sort of hard
he's
boiled to the
young,
last
right?
gasp, and he realizes like, oh fuck, I'm going to die, and they're all coming for me, and there's no way out, and then the detonator doesn't work, and all the and he there is a real sort of he feels very present and honest in his performance in those
I agree.
moments.
And he's also vaguely baby-faced. There's something...
Well, in a weird way, he's almost like these kids. He's sort of a bit older, but he's like a petulant child.
Yeah, well
you know?
put.
I
He
want
has
my dad back.
shades of...
The
Yeah.
U.S. government kidnapped my dad. He was a cartel drug
When he said
kingpin.
that, I was like, "Oof, I don't know.
Yeah, you.
No, I think that's true. And like again, like it could get a richer treatment, but very watchable, very scary. Let's talk about the action because the
Let's.
action might be one of the strongest things about this movie.
Yeah, I think it is, especially there's some good flurries of action early on, but this really is a film that's building up to a massive finale, which is really, really good.
Yeah, it is good.
It's
yeah,
well filmed, huge production value. They've got like 2 Black Hawks. They've got an Apache gunship.
you have a
there's
couple
some
of those in the
beautiful-
backyard in Glendale,
yeah,
right?
I flew in on the.
You bought that ADU property
Actually,
to build 3 helipads.
The Apache is having its an oil change.
Sure, along with my
today.
mullet. So there's a couple action scenes to focus on. The opening attack on the Palace of Justice.
Yeah.
Well done, but like again, we talked about it's like so removed from the rest of the movie that I think you spend a little time being like, what's going on here? It
Yeah.
almost feels like the opening of a Bond movie where that
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like not related to the rest of the movie,
Yeah.
even if it rocks.
Right.
Billy missing the head count when
Yeah.
he's bringing out information in like a spiral notebook with photos. I think that sustained sequence is the best part of the movie by a mile. It really
Steals
works
a
for me.
Humvee and
There's something very there's dread in it. It's
Yeah.
scary.
Yeah.
I remember being a kid, 2 things about this movie before we watched it. One is the scene where Callie whips him with the pen or
Yeah,
whatever that
yeah.
happens to be. And the second one, when he runs back, when he very wisely takes the towel and dresses. It's like,
Clever,
I was in
yeah.
the shower. Like that, there's so much dread in that. And it really, really...
That bit's really gripping.
Yeah, it is really gripping. I think that's the best sequence in the movie for me. And it's a sustained... I like action sequences in movies that are sustained, that are moving over a period of time. I think another great example of this is like the bank robbery in Heat and also the entirety of Michael Bay's Ambulance.
Yeah, agreed. There's one other moment of action that is a... This is a big spoiler. I mean, unfortunately, it's
46 minutes in.
It's hard to talk about
and
this movie
almost
without
35 years since the movie came out.
Yeah,
So.
it's hard to talk about movies without spoilers. So forget. But this one really is a big one. So if you're thinking of watching the movie, like you just preface it by saying this is a big spoiler. Okay, the death of Will Wheaton's character Joey Trotter is such a shocking moment, but it's horrific. So basically, what happened? Let's just to explain what this is, and there's a point I want to make about it. So Joey Trotter, the Will Wheaton character, is the son of this mafia don. but interestingly, he doesn't sort of wield that. He hates it. He hates and he when the bad guys discover that he is the son of this powerful mob boss, they
get him out.
They're like, get him out, you
Yeah.
know, because they don't want the blowback from that. But Joey says, no, I'm not going. Like, fuck you. I'm staying with my friends, and ends up grabbing a gun and runs out. And this was the moment where it was like, holy shit, suddenly this film has become kind of realistic. Both because when that happened, and I thought, if he becomes a superhero in this moment, I'm like turning it off. But it didn't. In fact, he didn't know how to use the gun. There's this moment where he pulls it, and the kickback forces him upwards, and then he ends up getting shot by one of the henchmen. And when that happened, my jaw hit the floor, you know, and I equate it to, and obviously it's deeply disturbing for obvious reasons that we don't need to get into, but in for pure storytelling and within the world of movies, it reminded me of the plane crash in Die Hard 2, in the sense that it's like a transgressive, upsetting moment that you don't expect. It occurs around the same point structurally as well. Sometimes in screenwriting,
it's like the low point.
Actually, it's the midpoint. It's
right.
midpoint, aka point of no return.
Me trying to challenge the screenwriter. What an asshole.
There's no hard and fast rules to this per se, but
it's on page 52 of the screenplay.
Because it doesn't have to be. This isn't an exact.
Well, this movie hits some beats. So there's some real moments if you know screenplay structure where you're like, I recognize this moment.
But that, for me, was like point of no return. And when that happened, I was like, holy shit. Because this film was fairly predictable. But when that happened, it was kind of like, wow, now there's such a fascinating wrinkle.
Yeah.
Where's this going to go? Because now they've killed the
second lead.
And the son of this mafia boss. And what's that going to mean? And it does have consequences, because Louis Cali's father is then murdered in prison, which nullifies
also kind
this
of
whole,
shocking.
which was also shocking. So this film veers between like, hey, youthful hijinks, and then extraordinarily shocking, disturbing bursts of violence.
And a son is dead and a father's dead, and they die like not of each other, but they.
So to your point, maybe there is a little bit more thematic heft lurking underneath this seemingly kiddie Die Hard film than I gave it credit for. Actually, that moment I thought was like.
Troubling.
It was deeply uncomfortable. It was kind of brilliant from a storytelling standpoint. Yeah. Remember, this film was made in 1991, so we can't hold,
It's different. It's a different
era.
It's all context, right? To lighten the mood, boy, it would suck to be that henchman. He's shown up there. He's kind of just doing his job.
I was kind of worried for him.
Yeah,
I thought he was going to be killed by Cali, actually. And
there's a what I would consider an almost glaring error in that moment, which is Cali does not pick up that machine gun that Will Wheaton has, and it just sits next to him, and all the boys rush up, and there's just a machine gun there, and one of the terrorists eventually comes over and takes it.
Right.
But you're kind of like, why would they leave that there?
Yeah.
That seems wild. It kind of pulled me out of the moment, honestly.
Interestingly, in the book, the henchmen are basically kids themselves, late
really
teenagers. So they're almost like they're scared.
Gives it like a Lord of the Flies action movie
kids
vibe
themselves,
right?
So they're really afraid, because they also know, like, hey, if all these kids rushed us, like
that's actually really cool. The book sounds interesting.
It's better than I thought it would be.
Yeah,
there's some interesting stuff in it. Yes, delight in the mood, humor.
So, one of the things that this movie has going on it, the sort of humor scenes are the scenes where the boys are alone in the bedroom. After they've all been sort of like grouped together, Yogurt being among them, and they're kind of our boy Yogurt, Yogurt cast. They are. I hope someone goes like, "Hey, these guys did a podcast about toy soldiers, and they talked about you a lot."
Yeah, give us a shout out. Give us a shout out on
Sean Phelan.
Twitter.
Sean Phelan.
Hey, Sean.
Hey, Sean. Thank you. But like, even after the terrorists there's this little bit of like, why are you being such a bonehead kind of like vibes to it, and like it's never that funny for me, because I'm like, there's literally an armed guard outside. There's like a machine gun wielding lunatic outside the room. So like, the humor works in the beginning during the phone sex sequence and stuff like that, but it doesn't work in the rest of the movie for me, because it feels again a little incongruous with the rest of the movie. I can't genuinely think of a moment where I was like, like I never really laughed. It does not have, for example, the water gun of narrow margin.
There was one exception to that for me, which was when Denham Elliott drinks the mouthwash.
Oh, that was good.
Which he is basically creme de menthe and is alcohol, because he's sort of at his wit's end, and there's a whole joke about this mouthwash that's like basically
vodka,
smuggled alcohol that they're hiding in mouthwash bottles, and then at the end Denham Elliott, who is great.
He's great. Does anyone here speak ancient Greek?
Is that an
Indiana
India
Jones?
reference?
Well, remember there's a scene where he's like, Marcus knows 100 people in cities all over the world. With any luck, he's cut the grail already. And then it smash cuts
if you're casting an English academic like in that era, like he's the go-to.
Well, and also there were just a lot of good actors. No, Denham Elliott is great. He's a great actor.
He has a real
I love seeing him in this movie.
Yeah, it was like really a bit of class, you know,
for sure.
But the villains are largely humorless and charmless, unlike Hans Gruber and some of the other, more entertaining.
Louis Gossett Jr. has some dry lines, but I can't think of sort of like any off the top of my head.
No. Well, shall we talk about Louis Gossett Jr. now, or should we?
I'd love to talk about Louis Gossett Jr. Big dad vibes.
If I may, like if you're,
let me roll out the carpet.
If you're driving, pull over. If you're jogging, stop, sit down. If you're folding laundry,
but continue to walk, because when you the problem is that the blood flow is going to stop and you're going to be sore tomorrow. So if you're jogging, please just walk.
Yeah, walk gently and give me your undivided attention as I rhapsodize.
Welcome to Louis Gossett Jr. Cast, the podcast hosted by Phil Gawthorne within the Die Hard on a Blank podcast.
He is a genius, and I'll tell you my opinion as to why, right? It was from one of his very first lines. What he can do with perfunctory dialogue, right, is incredible. He can turn it into this tapestry of nuance and complexity and pathos and emotion. There's a moment, and just straight away, right? There's a moment where they come into the room. His first appearance, I think, is Billy comes into the room, and Louis Gossett Jr. is standing there with two marshals because they're going to move the kid out who's the son of the judge.
Right.
And the way that he says this line, he says, "Let us have the room." And he says it in a way that you could say that line in a way that was like, "Let us have the room." You could say it. He cuts against being an authoritarian at every turn in this movie, because he actually by saying it in that way, he's treating the kids with respect. He's not being like a bully. He's not laying down the law. And he does that throughout the entire movie. Even that there's also a scene where after Will Wheaton's character has been shot and he turns up, he gives Callie a speech where he's like, the government will like hunt you down and they'll get you eventually. But instead of doing the obvious thing of like coming from a place of anger, he's tearing up as he's saying it. So he always makes these fascinating choices that are so thoughtful and just elevate like real, just like, almost cliched tropey lines, or just lines with no color. I don't. Have you seen An Officer and a Gentleman?
Yeah. Oh my God, it's my dad's favorite movie.
So I watched it for the first time ahead of this, because I was like just in love with Louis Gossett Jr.'s acting style and what he was doing, and I've always been a fan of his, but like. He's taking it to a new level, and he won the Oscar for that performance. And there's a moment like that at the end of that movie where Richard Gere comes to him and says, they've been at loggerheads the whole movie, and they even have a physical fight at one point because, of course, Louis Gossett Jr. is the drill sergeant that's training Gere's character Zach Mayo to be an officer. And at the end of the movie, when he actually is an officer and he goes to see him, and he says basically like he kind of thanks him, but there's a military like discipline that has to happen in that moment. And Louis Gossett Jr. says, "Get the hell out of here," in a way that is, but he says it with like, "I can't deal with the emotion that you're bringing to me." It's like, he he's like such a hard guy, but he makes he brings you into his soul in the way that the best actors do. And he can take a line like that, "Get the hell out of here," and imbue it with their entire relationship, his entire career, his raison d'etre for life, why he does this, because he's helping, even though he's a complete bully and a bastard to all of these people, you realize that's just his job. He has to dehumanize them. But in a way, he just reads, like you're saying, to your point, dad vibes. There's paternalism. He's paternalistic, and he's particularly that in this movie. But I think he's an absolute, like any actor that is interested in just making more interesting choices, or if you have a sort of colorless part, in the sense that it isn't full of a ton of interesting detail or nuance or what have you, look at what Louis Gossett Jr. does with every acting choice and every line delivery, because it's not what you expect. The other thing, if you're a fan of his, if you've ever seen this incredible performance in Enemy Mine, which is a sci-fi movie he did with Dennis Quaid, which is there's bits of it a little corny, but he does a performance through heavy makeup and prosthetics as this alien that is transcendent, especially with the limitations that he has to express emotion because of all of the makeup and stuff. I think he's an absolute genius, and I just love him to death. And I just needed a moment to rhapsodize about him.
I think all very well said. You sort of have given me more to think about, because I think my relationship is primarily Iron Eagle. Which are like probably, in some ways paycheck movies, right? A little bit, but he's great. I want to say two things that brought up for me, specifically related to toy soldiers, but also the themes of the idea, which is he's paternal, but he's also anti-authoritarian because he knows that everyone else has given up on these kids and he's kind of the only family they have. And in order to he has to navigate the role of not being their parents, but also being the person that gives them some ideals kind of thing. And so therefore he treats them as equals, even when he has to discipline them. And it's like a pretty key thing. And if there's a theme of this movie, maybe there's a larger theme. And I actually have an interesting thought that may feel like it's way out on a diving board here, but I want to offer it to you. You mentioned the moment where he says, he says to Callie, the United States will hunt you down. They'll never stop. Do you know what Callie says back to him?
They say they will, but they never do, which has not aged. Is not true.
Yeah, but it's not true, but it's also a really interesting line if you read this movie about fathers and sons, because he's essentially saying is like, there's no consequences for my actions.
Oh, interesting.
And this is a guy who earlier is like, talks about discipline and all these things. Like, he doesn't actually believe that he'll face any consequence for this. And so if you think about thematically the idea of fathers and sons, like, what does that line mean to this guy's psychology? Which is like, I won't get in trouble.
I think what we're probably tapping into as we mine this is probably the underlying skill of David Koepp, right? And some of the things that he brought to this, because we're probably underestimating, like, he's a
great writer.
This is elite. He is elite. He's absolutely one of the top tier writers of the last 30 years. So
especially in that Hollywood vein, like every time you see a movie with a good script, a lot of time, David Koepp.
Yeah, he's a total master. There was another line in it around that time, because there's a real turning point after the Joey Trotter incident. But when all the kids kind of get Billy together, and it is a little bit of a low point. You weren't wrong in what you were saying earlier about it being a lowest point. I think it was a lowest point. It could be considered.
Well, this is the screenplay moment
either
when his back is against the wall, right? And it's like, we have to do something. And I love lowest point.
Billy Tepper, Sean Astin says, like, if you say do it for Joey, I'm going to puke. And that was a line where I just loved the subversive, like, nature of that. That there wasn't, it was cutting against sentiment.
It's not rah rah rah. Yeah,
no, it was just like, fuck, And then they kind of he calls him a douchebag or a moron or something, and they said, that's why we like you. We're all morons basically. And there was some that stuff was really, really great. So I think there's probably is David Koepp's guiding hand underneath some of this stuff. It does. Now you're saying it elevates some.
I think you know better than anybody that, like, as a writer, you bring your own things and the things you think about to the writing you do, and it, like, even if you're writing on assignment or whatever, like, it can't help but make its way into your thinking a lot of the time, and like the sort of shadows of a screenplay, right, or whatever the Joseph Campbell of it all, in terms of what the subtextual ideas of the movie are, right? On its surface, it's an action movie. On its thematically, it could be about fathers and sons, absentee fathers. Kids, a land where kids are smarter than adults, right? That kind of thing. There's some things going on with it.
Lord of the Flies, as you mentioned, is also an interesting sort of comp.
Absolutely.
In that respect. Shall we move on to? Should we
that got serious.
That got a little
real.
Woo,
you guys
a little
all right?
heavy.
You guys okay? Welcome to Serious Cast. Oh my God, I have to stop.
Let's lighten up and go to the Oscars.
Die Hard Oscars, aka the Action Movie Awards. The John McClane. Oh wait, tuxedos, mullets.
Yep, all set.
Got to get my water gun Beretta in its holster.
Get the old cummerbund. All right.
The John McClane Yippee-Ki-Yay Award for Best Quip. What are the nominees?
Now, this is not a particularly quotable film, I would say, and this is another illustration of the sort of thing we're talking about with the tenets. When you realize that if one of these films has sort of lower scores, if you like, on one of the Oscars, it kind of speaks to a missed opportunity for, like great lines. I mean, look at Shane Black. It's like, not only can he write incredible plots and incredible characters, but they're also very quotable.
Yes.
This film, it falls a little short on that. I was really struggling to find any quotable lines. The ones I've got is like, and I mentioned this because I thought it was a very McClane type soliloquy where Billy Tepper says like, great, the school is taken over by terrorists and I'm still on pots and pans. That felt very McClane.
That's a good line.
Right?
Pots and pans is what they make kids do when they're in trouble. Yeah.
The other one I thought was great was Denham Elliott as the headmaster, Robert Gould, saying like, this object I'm holding here is called, some of you may have seen one before. It's called a book. You may have seen one on television. I thought that was a lovely moment. But the one I like that I think probably distills the movie the best is Dean Parker, Louis Gossett Jr. saying, don't you worry about wearing me out. I'm going to wear you out. I thought that was like
that's the winner.
A cool line.
Yeah,
that's my
a good choice. Yeah, again, not like a quotable movie in that sense, but that's a good line. The Hans Gruber Master Thief Award for stealing the film. The nominees are
Andrew Divoff as Louis Cully.
Interesting.
Denham Elliott as the headmaster, Dr. Robert Gould. Jerry Orbach's uncredited extended cameo as the mafia boss, Albert Trotter. But who are we fucking kidding? The winner is Louis Gossett Jr. by a fucking mile.
Is he in the movie too much?
Come again? Sorry, my brain just exploded. What?
No, I guess it's not.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Is he too large of a role to steal the movie?
No, he's credited as and Louis Gossett Jr. He's like,
okay.
He's not the lead, is he? Right? Billy Tepper is the lead.
I don't think anyone steals the movie besides him. The one person that I thought was interesting. Yeah, it's Louis. I can't even remember who my other pick would be. So let's go Louis Gossett Jr. You can have it. No, of course he's incredible. I agree.
No, he really does. He really does anchor the movie.
Well, he makes it credible. Adds a credibility.
And moving. He brings he brings an emotional depth to it.
What about the guy who comes and goes, "Why don't you just go in and shoot them?" Like, what about that guy? Remember
at
the family
PTA?
meeting? Yeah, the very bizarre,
I love how Orbach's just
wide-angle, low
chilling
shot.
at the back of that PTA meeting, like just a mafia boss that's like chilling
you believe
at the
these
back,
fucking people?
All right.
Dick Thornburg Award for Dick of the Movie. The nominees are
the humorless, colorless FBI Deputy Director Otis Brown.
Oh, that guy blows.
Played
Good
by
choice.
Mason Adams.
Yeah.
Any of these punk rich kids.
Yeah.
And honestly, my choice for Dick of the Movie is Billy Tepper.
Oh, wow. Controversial choice.
Yeah. Can the hero be Dick of the Movie?
I don't think he's a dick. I really don't.
do.
I feel for him. I feel for him. We should know that Phil has a t-shirt on that says, I hate kids. No, my pick is the sheriff, the shitty sheriff.
Oh, yeah.
Who is like, I'm going to
choice.
go in and save the day. No, that literally that scene started. I was like, Dick of the movie.
Is that the same? Is that the same sheriff that's like his uncle is selling liquor to
selling liquor to kids? Yeah. He's the Dick Thornburg of the movie.
Yeah, we'll let Billy off. I'm being a little harsh.
Yeah, you're being really hard on Billy.
It's just because I've become such a starch-shirted adult.
Well, again, the I hate kid teacher. He showed up with a briefcase. He showed up with a briefcase.
What is that
today.
like? I'm like the character in those kind of movies that's the stuffy dean who's like, Corey,
stop having fun.
All right. Best Death, presented by Marco. Our nominees are...
No more table!
Colombian...
Next time you have a chance to kill someone, don't hesitate!
I made the mistake of stepping on your Marco. Whenever you're in that zone, I now know to just step back and let you do your thing, because it's so enjoyable.
Thanks for the advice.
Alrighty, Roo. The Colombian judge who is thrown out of the helicopter Scarface style.
Oh.
Will Wheaton's shooting. Henchman Jack Thorpe prepping a bazooka to shoot the inbound Blackhawks, then being blown away by a previously hidden Apache gunship. And
hate it when that happens. The Apache gunship.
That's a pretty cool
It is
moment.
badass.
And Callie's messy comeuppance. Thoughts, moans, groans, worries, concerns?
No worries, no concerns. It can't be Will Wheaton.
No, it's just too ugly.
The judge thing goes on for too long in my mind at the beginning. My favorite kill is when the snipers take out the two rooftop terrorists and they go pew pew and they just go over. That's my pick because it's the most kind of like it's actually great filmmaking in that you see the rifle scope go through the fence and then they go down. I really like that one. I also like how it has a storytelling function, which is then he drops the grenade, however preposterous that is, that stops the SWAT team from going in and kind of it echoes, even though not exactly the same thing, of like the pricked finger from Die Hard when the SWAT guy pricks his finger.
The SWAT team guy.
Just the kind of moment of like humanity that offers, whether subversive or not, you know?
I think Jack Thorpe's death is pretty great, but
that's a great action movie death.
But just, I mean, the finale of this is fantastic.
It's good
for action. For strip away any of my mealy mouthed, political.
You're the Paul Verhoeven of this podcast.
But that is a fantastic action sequence. But Callie's messy comeuppance is quite an interesting moment because, the Dean bursts in through the window. I hate the trope in movies where a civilian is given a gun by
That's so unrealistic. It's ridiculous.
It's just that bit is like.
It's so unrealistic in this movie, Toy Soldiers, that a guy but yeah, no, I mean, it is.
Even within this
bugs
movie,
me. It bugs me a little bit. I actually noted that too.
I just wish I'd known more about Louis Gossett Jr.'s background. Like you could have things like that. Like when he has the heart-to-hearts with Billy, if we could know a little bit about, was he a wild kid?
He's a Vietnam veteran, though, right?
Is he? Did they ever say that?
I think they say something like that because that was what made me go like, oh, he's going to get a gun at some point in this movie.
But
maybe he wasn't. No, Gene Hackman was a Vietnam veteran.
He was a Marine in Narrow Margin. Yeah, they do mention
narrow margin. But there might be something with Louis Gossett Jr. where he's like it would make sense, right? That he would be a veteran.
You totally buy it, but I don't know that they ever touch on it. And it was
if they don't, it's a sorely missed opportunity.
Yeah. Callie, but it's interesting because when he bursts through the window, you're all expecting him to kill the bad guy, but he doesn't. Mm-hmm. It's actually he distracts him.
No, he takes a bullet for the kids.
Yeah, he takes a bullet for the kid. Yeah,
yeah.
Which was kind of an interesting choice.
Is it trivia time?
It is.
Oh my boy!
Last time, this was always the fear with trivia is that it's going to come up during the episode.
My extensive knowledge is going to ruin your questions. I bet it hasn't happened this time. I bet I'm going to get them all wrong.
All right, so it's my time for some vengeance.
Yeah.
All right.
With podcast with a vengeance. Stop it! I gotta stop. All right.
And remember, this is for our listeners at home, so it's okay if you don't know them. Okay. Don't worry. It's
don't.
All right.
I win a copy of Toy Soldiers, the book, right?
That's secondhand copy that I somehow prized out of the deepest depths of
eBay.
Okay.
From Jeff Bezos' personal collection.
It's out of print.
I bet it is.
All right. Okay. Question number 1. Co-screenwriter David Koepp would become one of Hollywood's most sought-after scribes with a string of hits to his name. One of those hits was a 2002 thriller directed by David Fincher that could be described as Die Hard in a House.
Panic Room.
Yay!
Movie I rewatched during the pandemic. I'm a big fan of.
Yep. There you go. Question number 2. Toy Soldiers producer Mark Berg would go on to produce a 1994 Brendan Fraser comedy, which is essentially Die Hard in a radio station. Can you name that
Airheads.
movie? Yay! Fun fact about Airheads, it was shot on Fox Plaza, aka Nakatomi Plaza.
Huh.
If you watch Airheads again, you can totally see it.
I love the scene when Brendan Fraser at night looks up at the rooftop and sees flares of light on the roof, and then it cuts to McClane in a gun battle with German terrorists. That's my favorite bit.
In the multiverse. All right, and this is a deep cut. Okay. Toy Soldiers cast members Jerry Orbach and Otis Brown, who was the FBI guy that you were talking about, the kind of grey robotic guy, previously played almost identical roles in a popular thriller from 1986 that was subtitled Murder by Illusion. Can you name that movie? And there is a clue. You can phone a friend.
Come on. Yeah, phone a friend.
This was, I know this is a hard one. You want to phone a friend?
Yeah.
All right, here's the clue. The film starred Brian Brown and Brian Dennehy, and it had a sequel in 1991.
1986?
The first one was 1986.
And there was a sequel in 1991. Brian Dennehy was in it. I have no idea.
It's FX. Do you know that movie?
Oh, come on. Yes, I do know
It's
it.
currently streaming for free on Amazon Prime, or hopefully it still
Okay,
will be at the
that's-
time of release of this episode.
That's embarrassing.
It's a fun movie. Yeah, it's really weird, like piece of
That's
trivia.
embarrassing that I got it wrong. I like FX.
I love FX. It's great, and yeah, Jerry Orbach plays a mafia boss in that called Nicholas DeFranco, and Mason Adams plays a Justice Department official called Edward Mason. And the point I wanted to make about this was that it kind of speaks to the laziness and the shorthand of the casting in this movie that totally like trades off the fumes of previous roles, like with R. Lee Ermey, right, who plays the like military commander in Toy Soldiers. To me,
From Kubrick's Full
Right.
Metal Jacket.
so this is what the movie is saying. It's like, hey guys, you all saw Full Metal Jacket, right? Like, so you know this guy's
Yeah,
a badass.
that's good. Yeah,
right,
that's
moving
good.
on. So we don't need to give this guy
and
any
he's
kind
so
of character.
neutered in this movie.
Does
He's so
nothing.
like
But
subdued.
this is my biggest, like, it's just such a missed opportunity because when you think about Die Hard, if a character is in it for 1 second, like the fucking convenience store guy that Al Powell is buying his Twinkies from, that character is alive. He
Yeah.
feels like dimensional.
Yeah, no, that's
he
really
has
good.
texture. In this movie, like key characters like the FBI guy or the military commander have absolutely no color to them
No,
whatsoever.
that's true. That's good.
You know, and it's just a missed opportunity, and those are the kind of details that separate Die Hard from the pack. That said, I like this movie.
I do too.
You know?
I feel like we've illuminated some things about
And
it.
you've
that
made
make it
me like it like another half a star actually with
So-
your thematic analysis.
So that's 1 star. No, I'm kidding.
So it's half a star. No, I'd give it 3. I'd give it 3. I'd give it 3
I give it
stars.
2.5. I
I'd
think
give
I
it
like it a
3.
little less than you, but I do like it. I think look, enjoyable time. Well, rating the movie. You know, I don't know that again. This is an important action movie, but it's indicative of an era that does not exist anymore. When like you could kind of make an R-rated movie with kids in it,
Yeah.
doing kind of adult things, and you know, some part of me misses this kind of like it's not for adults, but this like movie that a 13-year-old could probably watch and it would be, or I was 10, a 10-year-old could kind of watch it and be fine and like kind of. I mean, I remember being a kid and finding it a little disturbing and upsetting. Like it's sort of like, you know, it wasn't like watching Die Hard where it was adults, right? People who felt like I'd never be their age. I'm now older than Bruce Willis, right? But like, there was something as a kid upsetting about this movie and challenging and you know, sort of a tangential thing. I just showed my daughter Wizard of Oz and she was scared of it. And I was like, yeah, it's okay to be scared of movies,
yeah,
right?
it's weird.
normal.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's a weird movie and like,
Yeah.
but like movies are scary. That's part of the experience you're supposed to have in a movie. You're supposed to be scared, thrilled, sad, whatever. So like, I sort of miss. I think that these are valiant attempts at doing cool things with kids, and you know, you mentioned earlier you don't like kids content. I much prefer this kids content to a lot of the kids content you get today, which is like sort of a little more mild, depending on what it is. I'm not saying like let's show our 3-year-olds Die Hard 2 Die Harder, but I miss this era of movies, which is somewhat maybe in some ways what this podcast is about.
I found it like a really refreshing, especially because this was one of the few films I hadn't seen, so I had no nostalgic attachment. I was seeing it completely clear-eyed, and I have to say, although I had some like slightly weird feelings around some
Icky
of
vibes.
it, icky vibes, I thoroughly enjoyed this movie.
Yeah,
I
it's a
thought
good
it was
time.
really entertaining, really fun. Great performance from Louis Gossett Jr.
And Sean Austin.
Yeah, and some twists and turns that I didn't expect along the way, and a genuinely exciting final sequence.
And there are things going on thematically that
Yeah.
are more interesting than maybe even some action movies have. You
Yeah.
know, yeah. Well, I think that about
Yeah, I think that about does
that
it.
wraps it up.
Next time,
Next time on the show,
we're doing
Ricochet.
Yeah.
But before you listen to the next episode of the show, have you subscribed to the show? Have you subscribed to the show? Have you subscribed
Why
to the
not?
show?
Why
Wait,
have
what
you-
is wrong with you? Have you rated and reviewed the show? If you like us,
We're just
subscribe.
kidding.
If you really like us, rate. I'm not kidding. If you love us, please review us on Apple Podcasts. Help us the show to continue to climb the charts, which it's doing every day. If you want to follow us on social media, I am at Liam G. Billingham on Twitter, and I'm also at Liam G. Billingham on Letterboxd, where I am cataloging every one of the films that we cover on this show. Phil, if we want to find you on the internet,
I'm hiding in the dark corners of Twitter under the name Philip Gawthorne.
correct. And if you want to follow the show, we are at DieHardOAB on Twitter and Instagram. You can also send us an email with your thoughts on the episodes, on the show, a voice memo. If it's good, we'll talk about it on the show. That's diehardoab@gmail.com. I should probably check that address. I haven't checked it in a couple days. So maybe we have many adoring emails from people. We want to hear from you. We like you.
Come and
We
join
like
the
this
party.
podcast. Welcome to
Yay.
the party, pals.
Yeah.
I'm Liam Billingham.
I'm Philip Gawthorne.
We'll be back next time with some new FBI guys, I guess. Die Hard on a Blank is a podcast hosted and written by Philip Gawthorne. Liam Billingham co-hosts and produces the show. Mike Mayer and Michael Sugar are the executive producers. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at DieHardOAB. Please rate, review, and subscribe and follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. Special thanks to Suki Chu and the whole team at Sugar 23. See you next time on Die Hard on a Blank.
Shop Plato's Closet tax-free August 2nd through 4th for back-to-school styles. We sell the trendy, gently used styles you need to make a difference in the world and in your wallet for back-to-school shopping. Save up to 70% off regular retail prices by choosing recycled styles. Save even more when you shop tax-free this weekend. Make a change that others can respect and repeat. Shop Plato's Closet in North Charleston and West Ashley this year for your back-to-school looks. Plato's Closet, located in West Ashley on Sam Rittenberg Boulevard and North Charleston on Rivers Avenue.